G'day friends, happy Valentine's Day 2020. Thanks for joining me for a bit of a tutorial today. It's going to be kind of simple, but I'm also going to talk about a technique that has been around for literally billions of decades. So I think that'll be fun to kind of look at. It's really simple. I mean, I don't know why I'm hyping it up, but I've got a book here, and this is one of my Disney coffee table books. I actually used one of these on YouTube last week, but this is another one. This is the 50s and the 60s, the mid-century era. Hidden art, do as they pleased. Wow, I could have just said the title and not been so cryptic about it. Anyway, the image that I'm kind of inspired by today is the little house, and this is a story sketch by Mary Blair, who is one of our faves. We love her. And I mean, look at all this gorgeous stuff. If Mary Blair doesn't make you want to crack out a bunch of paints, I don't know who would. So let's just appreciate this for a second. I wanted to be inspired by this and kind of recreate a little happy Valentine's Day house, a little house of love, home is where the heart is, etc, etc, etc. But also I don't want to force my beliefs about Valentine's Day onto you, so do what you will with this tutorial. If you're celebrating Galentine's Day or Broentines or Palentines, I really don't know what people are doing these days, but if you want to adjust and alter the tutorial, please be my guest. This is simply to have a bit of fun, to kind of go through it step by step and to get you active in your journals or just on a piece of loose paper or the back of an envelope, whatever you've got. You really don't have to have much. So these are my little concept sketches that I did, just kind of working on the idea, thinking about what mediums I might want to use, how I might want to teach it, and how to get the look of it. So I do have the look. I have the look here, and what was really interesting is I did this in my Hobonichi, which has just become a sketchbook. I do have a Phobonichi because I don't want to work in one that's dated, so I use a fake one for my documenting, but I do love to just sketch in this, and I have a bit of a play in here. We play. Some of it's just like very emo. Get into that. Happy Valentine's Day, ladies. But anyway, so this is what I was kind of working on today, and I think I'm going to go with this. I know, I'm going with this one right here because I love it. And the benefit of working in this Hobonichi is that I did have a grid to work with, and even though it's a teeny tiny sketch, I was able to translate that into a bigger format just using the grid that I drew it on. So if we're not too overexposed here, hopefully you can see this is a grid that I've literally transcribed this little house on here. And it's proportionally, it's exactly the same way that I drew it here. And the reason that I think using a grid is super important for something like this is that it's really hard to explain, but there are a lot of subtle nuances that go into drawing that don't translate well out of a sketch into cleaning up. That's why a lot of the time I do love to just remain sketchy. Not as a person, as an illustrator, but I like to kind of leave all those first lines, all those rough impressions, even some of the grid lines and the structure of the illustration, because that also adds its own charm. When you clean it up a lot and actually make it really, really neat and clean it up, a lot of that charm can actually disappear. But for certain things, especially if you're working on original character designs, or you're working on architectural or kind of modeling kind of things that do actually need to represent some kind of realism, you're going to want to be able to translate the proportion and the perspective and the skew of things, which is how grids become really, I'm saying this so weird, grids are really useful for that, basically. But I don't tend to get carried away with all of that because it's actually not something that brings me a lot of joy all the time. I love to just play. I don't love to get too technical about the drawing. But for something like this, that I wanted to keep the proportions exactly right, because I did a version of it here, which I loved, and I actually love how wonky it looks, but like I said, the nuances of like where the proportion and the placement is, you can lose it really quickly. So when I shortened the house, I found that I didn't like it short, and I didn't like some of the other features. I didn't like the door being too long, because I thought it looked like a beard, or like suddenly the house looked like a man. I don't know, maybe that doesn't look like that to you, but that's what it looked like to me. So how to take what was originally charming about it and make sure that you're able to redo that, reinterpret that. So using a grid, super helpful. Also with scaling, you know, you've got a really little image here. If you do want to blow it up, you could just do it in the photocopier or scanner, or take a photo and just like zoom in. I get that. But just for the skill and the purpose of showing you today, also to help teach drawing, People learn lots of different ways. I'm a very visual learner, so if you just tell me the shape and kind of show me, I can go with that. But some people are a bit more analytical. Some people need it to be broken down bit by bit by bit. And I couldn't possibly hit on everything, but today I will kind of teach you if you're one of those people that kind of plays Battleship drawing, if you know what I mean. Like, you know, line goes from B12 to B17. So, you know the game Battleship? We're going to kind of learn how to draw this specifically on this. So if you do have a piece of grid paper, I wouldn't recommend a Hobonichi because the grid is going to be so small you will end up with something like this, unless you calculate everything. So if I say draw 5 squares across, draw 10 squares across, then you'll be able to, you know, enlarge it 200%. But I don't know, that's getting a little tricky. I don't really want to bring math into your Valentine's Day, so do what you will with that. I've kind of just got this bigger grid here. My printer actually prints off grids just as regular sheets. Like, you don't need to, I don't know why it does that, but it just does it. So I printed off a grid and then I enlarged it all on the printer, just photocopying it. So I made it a little lighter as well. I do have this anti-Valentine's Day one. So just take a screenshot of that, reinterpret that if you will, if you want to do that. I kind of like finished one of those examples just for the people that wanted to see it finished. It's not my fantasy. I love love. I love to celebrate being happy, so I don't know, but anti-Valentine's Day really doesn't speak to any part of me or my personality. But yeah, to each your own. You do you, boo-boo. Alright, so let's get on to this. I'm gonna take my graph paper. I'm going to leave this here as we go through it. I've got my red blue pencil. You know I love to use this. I don't need to use that. You know what? I'll use black. No, I lied. I'm going to use the red blue because I want to put the marks in red and I'll connect the lines up in the blue. I'm also the kind of learner that if you're kind of going too slow for me, I will just keep going. So do that. If this is too slow for you or too boring or too many numbers and squares and counting, just copy that. And also, please don't feel the need to copy this line for line and even get a ruler out. I'm going to use one because it's kind of easier for me today. But there are versions of this that are super wonky, like this one here that I really love. This one is the same kind of idea, but it's just super wonky. Everything's you know, curved lines and skewed. So I wouldn't use a ruler for that. If you're a proficient illustrator, you would just be able to sketch this out anyway just by looking at it because they're very simple shapes. But like I said, I'll let you do you. So first we're going to want to get a center line because we've got one that runs right the way through this image. I'm going to use this as my center line, so I'm just going to put a red line all the way down. I'm literally going to go from top to bottom as I count it out because you can see things here kind of end up in squares. So this here is 1 square, 2 square. This is a 2 square kind of heart smoke thing. So I know that I need 2 squares to fill over here, and it's 1 square gap from that center line. So if I just leave, I'm going to start probably here, I think. If I leave 1 square gap, and then I've got 2 squares that I need to fill with that heart, I know that it needs to be in this area here. So that way I can just draw my heart. For anyone curious, this is just a heart, but when it dips back in, it loops and joins at the bottom. Very simple. I also know that as I come down those 2 squares, this is where the point of my roof is. So I'm going to add my point in here, and now I'm going to start to give myself a little, like a few reference dots to be able to join up. So how many squares down is the roof? I can see I've got one column, or row I should say. Is it a row or a column? I don't know. It's that, 1, 2, 3. So I need to come 3 squares down, which would be 1 square here, 2 square here, 3 squares. So I'm going to add a little notch. That's how high my roof is. So this grid is actually a lot bigger than this one. So I'm actually taking this and I'm kind of making it smaller in this version. But I want you to be able to see where everything is, and hopefully you can visualize it better if it's bigger. I'm just going to keep working down because I've got this part of the roof here. Now I want to know where the bottom of the house ends. So I've got how many more rows? 1, 2, 3, 4. So to come 4 squares down, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll make my little notch on that line. So I'm still on the center line. I'm just marking out these points on the house. And then the rest is an arch, which I'll leave for now because I've got a little bit of a trick to that. The next thing I want to do is come back up to the top, and I need to know how far out everything is to know where to connect my lines to. So I might actually come to this middle dot here where the roof kind of starts. I need to know if this is my center, how far out do I have to go before the roof ends? So I've got 1 square here, 2 square here, 3 square, but it's actually halfway through this 4th square. So I need to count from the center line. I need to count 1, 2, 3 and a half. So if I'm on this center line, I'm going to count 1, 2, 3 and a half. That way I can put my little notch right there. That's where my roof is going to end up. Because this is completely symmetrical, whatever we count out on the left side, we'll count out on the right side. So I've got 1, 2, 3 and a half. Now you don't need to measure between half these squares. My guess is that they're small enough for you to be able to just take an estimate. I mean, like I said, this doesn't have to be perfect, but we are just going to use the grid to be able to count out, the proportion of how this was originally drawn, just to translate it directly. So I've actually got all the parts of my roof now. Now I might just want to connect that just so I've at least got something going on. I'm going to use my blue. I'm going to go from the top. I've got my little Muji ruler here. I'm going to connect that triangle together. So I've gone down to that point that was out on 3.5. I'm going to cut straight through that center line. And I'm going to connect this top point to the outside dot. And we have our roof. We've literally made half the house. It was that simple. Let's just blue in this smoke heart, just so we know that it's there, and that's what we want to keep. Let's try and build out the bottom of the house before we put any details in. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 squares down, but from this center line, how far out do we need to go to know where the edge of the wall is? I've got 1 square here, and I've got a half a square here. So this is actually kind of shorter. We've got 1 here and a half. So this is going to be my little notch, and I've got 1 square and a half. There's my other little notch. You can see that this actually doesn't connect to the outside point. So how many squares over do we need to move to figure out where this connects? And you can see if this is the half, we've got a line here, and then we've got another half. So a half plus a half is technically just a 1. But since we need to go 1 over from this halfway point, we need to bring it into this square here. This is where you're not going to really have to do math, but you will have to kind of understand that half and a half equals 1. So if we can just lock that in, Eddie, then we should be fine. This is our little notch, and like I said, anything we do on the left, we do on the right, and vice versa. We need a half over here and another half. And I've got my 2 little notches, so now I can just connect this part of the house down to my corner. I'm going to run straight across the center line where that bottom point is, and then connect it back up to my roof at that other notch. And then we have our little trapezium, kind of upside down trapezium connected to the triangle. Let's put our details in going from top to bottom. So on the roof, I've got this little chimney underneath the heart. You can actually see that this heart ends at the bottom of this square, and then halfway through the square underneath it, this chimney starts. So I know that halfway underneath whatever this square is, I need the top of that chimney, and then it just connects down to the roof. So I'm just going to connect it straight down to that roof. I might even not use the ruler for this and just, well, I should have used it. I thought I'd been drawing for long enough for it to be a straight line. Absolutely not. There you go. We're going to connect it down to that roof. I don't know why, but this gives me like Chinese takeaway container vibes. Just me. Just put a little handle on it, and I don't know why I'm seeing that right now. Anyway, the heart motif right in the middle of that roof. We're going sickly sweet with the hearts. Honestly, you could change this for whatever, but it is Valentine's Day. So this heart, if things don't actually hit the lines, I think this is a good thing to note as well. If you're seeing something that doesn't hit that line, like this doesn't really hit halfway point, but it doesn't really hit, the bottom. If it's just in the area, I think it's best to count out the squares that it is in. So I can see that this heart fills 1 square here, 2 square here, 3 square here, and 4 square here. So I've got 4 squares in the middle of this, technically right in the middle of this, that I need to fill with this heart. And I'm not going to be too precise about it and try and measure everything out, but it fills a substantial amount of each square. So I'll just think about that when I translate it. Like I said, things don't have to be exact. If you really wanted to get in there and start measuring things, then by all means go and do those calculations. But this is where, artistic liberty comes into play. You know that a heart here fills 4 squares. So all you have to do is fill 4 squares with another heart. So it could be a really thin one, it could be a really fat one, or it could just be not even a heart at all. It could be whatever you want to put in that space. But since we do have the squares, it is kind of easy to get that symmetry and just fill the area with a heart. I might actually shade that in So I know that that's where my heart is. You might want to do this, I know I'm showing you in red and blue, but you might want to do this in pencil so you can erase it all when you finish, all the working lines, or just let it live, or paint over it. You don't have to worry about some working lines showing. If that really bothers you, I'm sure you've already started in pencil and you've been erasing as we go. But I like for you to still see them because I want you to know where everything falls. So anyway, let's come down to the door, because that's in the center, that's easy. I'm seeing that it finishes halfway between this square and halfway between this square. So again, we've got a one width of a square, but it's just off center. So I need to go halfway between, I'm on the bottom of this house here. I need to go half over to the left and half over to the right from that midpoint, and it goes up 1 square, 2 squares. So I need to go up 1, 2, there's the top. So I might just notch in my halves there as well. And I have a door. When I connect it all up, the best thing about having a grid really is that you can kind of visualize where the lines are going. You don't have to just, guess it. So if you didn't have a ruler, you'd still get a pretty good looking image, pretty clean looking image, rather than a sketch where like a line goes over here and then suddenly you have to slice a line back in, which is what most of mine usually end up looking like. At least when I'm coming up with ideas. Usually, I don't know. I don't really think I clean much anymore. I usually let a lot of my sketches just live now. Just live, honey. Alright, these windows are a little tricky. You can see they're 1 square up from the bottom, so I'm going to put my little notch on this line, so I know that that's where they are. There's a line here, and then this line is halfway between the door, the side of the door, and this line here. So if what I'm explaining made sense, it would be this line that I'm looking at. If I take the door, the side of this door, and this line, I actually want a line halfway between it. And I know this is where we're getting into like halves and quarters and eighths, but you don't need to think of it like that. Just thinking of it as halving the half. I think that's a lot easier for people to understand. But if you want, just think of it as leaving a little gap between the side of the door and the window, because we do need the windows for some eyes. I think those are really cute. So that's where we're going to put that line. We're going up 2 spaces. So I need to go up 2 spaces. It's like playing a board game. Literally, Battleship. I probably should have just had the numbers here, like A, B, C, 1, 2, B12 to omega 3. This is such a stupid joke. I'm going to take this line over to, I'm seeing this notch is on a corner here. So I can see that this little corner is where I want to end my window. I'm going to take that over there. And then down here, it looks like I just copied the side of that line to come down. So if I were just to sketch a parallel line so that the side of this window was just running like a train track parallel to the edge, that's all I'm going to think about there. I'm not going to try and measure that angle and tell you it's at a 43-degree angle, so get your protractor out. Like, that's just not going to happen today. Sorry. Can't do it. And there's one window. So you're going to do the same thing on the other side. This is our line. This is the side of our door. I'm going to half the half. I'm going up 2 squares. I've got my little notch on the side. That little cross section over here that I just used. And then train tracks down the side. Just close off the bottom. And then I'm going to put it in blue just so you can see it. Have I lost you yet? I know these tutorials can be a little much, but I'm hoping that there's at least one person out there that this makes sense to, and you've maybe never come across this technique before. It kind of is just one of those age-old techniques, but this is actually really good for people that want to scale work, I think is what comes in handy for us in the art journaling kind of mixed media art community. I don't know why we'd be scaling too much, but to each their own. I'm sure there's a project where it might come in handy, but if you want to scale something and keep the original integrity of that image, and because the reality is, like, if you're working in A5 all the time, your hands are going to be used to drawing something at this size. If you want to move into an A3 journal, suddenly your illustration like this is sitting in the middle of a massive page, and it feels daunting to know how to actually take this and make it so much bigger. My own personal issue is scaling up. I can scale down okay, but I have a problem scaling up. So this actually comes in handy for me when I want to scale up to a point where I actually just I need the grid. I've done this before with big ink pieces that I actually have hanging in my home, or when I used to do commissions, I did this with a pet portrait because I really couldn't get where some of the placement was, but there were really practical uses for this. If you've ever seen someone draw a mural on the side of a building or paint a mural, typically they will have it cut up into these grids and they will work square to square. It's like you're doing a puzzle, but you know where all the pieces go. You don't have to figure it out. Anyway, let's keep going. Inside these windows, I have two big hearts, which I'm not going to explain in any other terms than two big hearts. And now inside those hearts, I have a big circle on the right and a little circle underneath it. So I've got a big circle on the right, little circle underneath it. That is to remain white. So whatever you're coloring, just don't color those circles in. You can color the rest of the heart because that's going to be the pupil of our eye. But we want those circles to remain white because they are the catch lights in our eye and they're going to make it look like the eye is glistening or twinkling. We love a good sprinkle of twinkle here at JLB Creative. But you're going to make it look like those eyes are twinkling and cute little puppy dog eyes. It's very cute. I really like that. But yeah, kind of keep those white. Don't bother coloring those in. If you accidentally do it, you can just put some white paint over it or a white gel pen. Right, we have this little sausage mouth. Right in the middle, it literally crosses the center line of our image. And you can see it's actually on this cross section right in the middle of the door. It actually lines up with the bottom of that window. And this is one of those things that I noticed that wherever the mouth was positioned started to make it look just a little off for me. You might actually like the mouth somewhere else, but for me, I needed to grid it out to know that, oh, this is where I like the mouth. It has to be on that line that the window sills are on. If they had window sills, you know what I mean? The bottom of the window. It has to be on that cross section. So I'm gonna put a little sausage mouth on there. Love that for me. And now I'm going to put these little eyelashes on. I didn't really grid these out. I kind of just drew little teardrops. But if you wanted to, just think of it as, I'm going to go straight in blue if you don't mind. I'm going to do it one in the middle of the window, one on the side of the window tilted to the left, one on the side of the window tilted to the right. And you're just going to copy that. I just wanted them to be bold because I feel like this was such a bold, cute little illustration. And the bottom ones are just a little smaller, but just flipped. But I didn't want to match those up completely because even with something clean and neat and, you know, sketched nicely, there can still be a point where it's too neat, like where it doesn't actually look like you drew it. So say you did all of these working lines, then you use some ink to ink everything together. It might just look like you printed it. So I always like to make sure that there's at least something that isn't quite matching, that isn't quite symmetrical. Unless I'm actually committed to doing a completely symmetrical piece, which why? I don't feel like I'd ever do that. But yeah, it's those eyebrows are sisters, not twins. It's even people that are considered like conventional beauties have not a perfect symmetry. There's something a little off-putting about a perfect symmetry. And I don't think so much like when, well, I don't know. To me, sometimes it can also look like it was done on a computer. And for whatever reason, I still don't vibe as much with digital art as I do with getting a pencil on paper. There are just things you cannot replicate. And so I think, you know, even though we've taken a lot of care to match some of this stuff up, if you have just had a wonky line, or you've got something that's just like the heart is just a little bigger on the left-hand side than the right-hand side, please feel encouraged to leave that. There is nothing wrong with that at all. And it's those little quirks that actually kind of tell a bit of a story about you. But yeah, I don't know what else to say about that. I think those quirks are just unique, and I think you shouldn't feel afraid to leave some of those in there. So eyelashes are what they are. Let's put the hill on, because this is a little happy home on the hill. I'm going to put a little house on the prairie. Laura Ingalls Wilder, eat your heart out. So I'm going to start in the middle. You can actually see that my hill is floating, which, you know, why not? I've come down 1, 2, 3, 4 squares, and it's actually going to line up with the side of the house here. So if I come down 4 squares, 1, 2, 3, 4, I just need to go on the line where the side of the house is, which we remember was this halfway line over here. So I'm coming down 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm over on the halfway line here. The thing with this is, I don't know how to explain this without just doing it, so let me just do it and hopefully this will work out for you. I want to do the curve, but I'm not going to really worry about what cross section's hitting where. I'm just going to roughly edge in an arc that goes from that house to that point. I'm going to turn my page because I find it easier to draw the arc this way than I do to have my hand go that way. So I'm just going to use what my muscle memory has locked in for me. I'm going to finish that arc. Right, so I've got a nice little rainbow, and it's kind of symmetrical, but like I said, let those quirks live. It doesn't have to be perfect. Now this is only a small hill, but say you wanted to go all the way down the page, like this was on a journal page, or this was on a piece of a card you wanted to give to someone, you can bring it all the way down, and you don't have to keep it going with any kind of, skew or a curve or whatever you want to do. You could actually bring it back in if you wanted to, but I would encourage you just to freehand it on one side, and if you can, end on a line or on a halfway point. So I'm actually just going to keep going down. I'm going to end at this little halfway point here. There we go. And then, whatever I've added, if I wanted it to be symmetrical, I'm going to count where this comes across from my line. 1, 2, 3, 4 and a half. Great. 1, 2, 3, 4 and a half. I'll put my line there. Then I'll know that's where I can end up on this side. And you see how simple it was for me to get that symmetry? So this is how you can actually use this to benefit your own drawing. Say you wanted to add... maybe you wanted to add a little heart on the hill over here. Not even a heart, but like a heart on a stick. Why would you do that? I don't know. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it on this side, and I'm going to kind of work within the squares, or at least using them as kind of references. That way I'll know where to put it on the other side. So if I can see, I'm on this part, I'm in this square here. So wherever this line is dissecting a square, which is over here, I know I have to start in this square. Now this line actually shoots off and hits that first point and then hits another point on the diagonal. So I'm coming off and I'm hitting this point and this point. Now I know that's where my stick's going to go. And the heart is on an angle, but it fills one square. So I know that this is the square that it's going to fill, and I just have to flip that angle. So if the bumps are going out to the left, the bumps have to go out to the right, which means I'm just going to put that on there like that. Now you don't actually have to add that, but because now it looks like some weird human. It looks like that's their head, those are the arms, this is the weird body. Please don't add those. I mean, do if you want, whatever, but yeah, that wasn't a part of the tutorial. Literally, I was just kind of saying, if you want to build in anything extra, it's as simple as doing it on one side and then referencing the placement from that side and applying it to the other. So yeah, have a bit of a play with that if you've never played with it before. It's fun. It's fun to work in that symmetry, but not care too much to make it, look unrealistic. The next thing I did was draw this line, this concentric kind of an arc inside of it, and I actually just did it one space the whole way around, so I could put a little frill detail in there. So I've got one block down here. If I use this as a guide, that's the halfway point, so this is the halfway point. I'll know I need to come down here, and that way I can keep that relative to the outside arc. The arc is going to be a little more sketchy than these lines because obviously we can't use the ruler, but I think you should just run with it. So here I'm going to need to come down one space over, so I'm in the half, that's the half, that's the one, that's the half, that's the one. I need to bring this down here. Just making these train tracks. So the inside I can do my frill detail. I didn't measure out those frills, they just are what they are. I started in the middle, and then I just kept going for as long as I wanted to go. I don't even know why I did it. I don't know why I did this whole thing, to be honest. I just thought it's Valentine's Day, you might like to put something nice and sweet in your art journal or your planner. This would be great to fill a planner page, actually, because I've got this planner that is vertical columns, so if I miss a day, there's just a vertical column, but I could just put a hill all the way up and a little house on top. But anyway, that is that. I know I've talked your face off, but hopefully you enjoyed that, and if you didn't, hopefully you just copied that real quick and then just got straight into it. But I'm going to use this as my inspiration to kind of, I might put one in my Fobonichi, and I might also put one in my art journal. And I think the one I put in my art journal, I'm actually going to do a little wonky version of this. So using all the same ideas, but not using a ruler and not using a grid, just kind of freehanding it really wonky. Might do that one there. But yeah, I'll put that footage in here and I'll join you for a voiceover and let you know how I got on with that. Alrighty, I'll see you after the cross-dissolve transition. Alright, I'm here. Okay, first of all, I want to say something. Steve's just making me laugh because this is the third time I'm doing this voiceover. My sinus has entered the chat, my allergies have made themselves known and present, and I'm just really struggling to get through the last 10 minutes of this voiceover, so please bear with me. I'm going to give you a bit of a play-by-play. I know I don't usually do that on this channel, so watch me get sidetracked and not be able to do it today, but I'm going to give it a red-hot go. So here we have my Fobonichi, which is an A5 MD paper 10th anniversary dot grid journal, which I really love. My Fobonichi is what I use to document things happening in my life, but not only events, it's more kind of feelings as well. So if you've got your glasses on, hopefully you'll be able to zoom in and read some of those passages and really get to know me a bit better. I mean, there's nothing in there. You're not really going to find anything. But yeah, this is a great little catch-all journal. So there's a fight within me sometimes to make everything very staged, like last week, how I used the inspiration of the coffee table book to illustrate a whole spread and work with that. And then other times to actually put things that are very meaningful, very sentimental, little bits of scrap trash paper that flies around the studio that has some kind of little meaning to me. There's a fight for me to go between both routes when I'm documenting in there, because obviously I want to decorate everything. I'm not much of a journaler on a blank page kind of a person. I do want to decorate things. I do want to play. I do want to draw and paint. And sometimes I've even gone to a journal and I've felt like, oh, I could just write down a lot of feelings right now. But then I start drawing and painting, and by the time I go to write, I've actually kind of resolved a lot of, if I've been frustrated, I've kind of calmed down a bit and I don't feel the need to write out as much as I felt like I did when I first started. So it's an interesting process. I think if you've made it this far through the tutorial, you might already be an art journaler, so I don't know why I'm preaching to the choir here. The next thing I'm doing... Oh, I didn't even explain what I was doing. See, I'm terrible at this play-by-play. I wanted to do a really simple version and a really complicated version, just for fun. The first one, I actually just thought there's nothing more simple than just cutting out the example that we just looked at, like the one we just drew. So I just cut it straight off the graph paper and glued it into the book and did a bit of a hill moment with that loop detail pattern, which I really love. Really simple, really effective. And like I said, now it's in there, it's captured. Not only am I capturing the memory of, doing that, but also the memory of teaching the tutorial, and it will also kind of reflect on, if any of you try this tutorial, whatever memories I build around that, those are going to be triggered every time I go back through that Fobonichi and I see that. And I only say that because I've done that before. I've put in old tutorial works. Ironically, this time last year, the Valentine's Day stuff, I did have some of that in my last year's Fobonichi, so maybe it's just a Valentine's Day thing. I get really carried away. The second one, I got into my art journal because I wanted to have a bit of a painterly kind of style going on, a little painting effect. I did do the black chalkboard paint background. These are all handmade modern paints from Target, very inexpensive and very fun to play with. They're not a super matte finish. If you water them down a bit, you can get a bit of a matte finish, but because I was just going to paint for the most part and use some gel pens on top, the only thing I would really recommend having matte paints for in mixed media is if you want to use pencils on top, or you want to use maybe water-based markers. But even then, I still use water-based markers on a bit of a sheen, like a bit of a satin finish. I don't know. I think you'll figure it out. Because even if there's a matte paint, there's some kinds of matte that people don't like. There's like the chalky residue matte, or there's a really transparent kind of flat matte. I don't know how to explain the difference, but I really do think that for the most part, I can tell you what I like, but as far as recommending things, I'll always be a little biased because it's personal preference. You know what I mean? Like, I would only be recommending it because I had a good time with it, but your sensitivities to, even the odor of some things, like some people just cannot stand the odor of Copic markers, so it's kind of pointless for me to say, oh, they're amazing, they're great, they're expensive, but they're worth it, if when you open the cap, you're going to faint. So always kind of take that with a grain of salt when I'm saying I like something. I'm only saying that because if history repeats itself like it usually does, I know that when I say you don't need something, people go and buy it anyway, and I'm so, honestly, like, I'm kind of a little bit over getting these messages of being blamed for people buying stuff they don't want to buy. I just don't understand it personally. If you don't want to buy it, just don't buy it. It's completely fine, and I think you can make do with a lot. Truly, you can make do with a lot. You can make do with not a lot, is what I'm trying to say. You don't need a lot to have a good time. But getting back to what we're doing, And so I use that dark background just to paint on top of. You know, you don't want to be using translucent paints for that because obviously they're not going to show up. But I also don't think you need something super opaque. I kind of like that dark background showing through a bit. It's a completely different effect that you really can't replicate very easily on a white background, and I think it gives its own kind of depth and texture. It's something that I learned from looking through those Disney coffee table books and trying, I think it was a Mary Blair piece from ages ago, where she just had a darker background and painted gouache on top of it. Also, dark backgrounds contrast colors really differently. So you can see a lot of these colors here are kind of pastel, but they still look pretty vibrant. I know the lighting gets a little crazy throughout the video. I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon for that. Please beg my pardon. What am I trying to say there? Sorry about the lighting. I didn't realize it was overexposed for a bit of it, but it still stands. Black will contrast bright colors and make them really punchy and vibrant, a little easier than they will kind of stand out on white. So that is also why I chose to go with a bit of a black background, because I was just kind of working in high contrast colors at this point. And even with that pastel mix, you know, there's very hot, vibrant colors in there, but there are really soft pastel ones. I still think they all kind of read really well. So I like that. Anyway, I've gone with the Daiso ink. I say Daiso, but I do think I've got it linked in my Amazon store in the description. So if you want to go and have a look at that, it's in there. But this ink dries water resistant. I don't want to say it's completely waterproof, because sometimes if there's sediment kind of on top, like if you've laid it on really thick, you can move it around a little bit. It's not, I wouldn't say it's water reactive. It's hard to explain. But from all intents and purposes, I was just going to do lining with it. I don't typically line like this. I would use a brush pen, like my pigment brush pen, but they're kind of empty at the moment, so I just grabbed a paintbrush. And I'm not going to lie, I actually kind of liked this. I thought it was really effective. Like I said, I don't typically line like that, but having the little ink there and the paintbrush and doing my lining, it was a lot harder to control, so I just loosened up a little bit, and I think that varied line width is just really nice and wonky in that really, you know, effective way, not that wonky and, oh, I can't control what I'm using kind of way, which is how I think most of us start out when we're using brush pens, because I hear it a lot. People just really don't like brush pens, but it's just a paintbrush. It's just preloaded. So if you feel more comfortable with a brush pen than you do a paintbrush, I think the rules kind of reverse. Not the rules, but the techniques kind of apply to both. I also do think, though, there's something to be said for how they feel in the hand. I do hold a paintbrush. I don't know, it's harder because a lot of them can be really thin, and I like a kind of a pen feeling, but it would be really weird to have a big handle on a teeny tiny paintbrush. So there is a bit of a difference. Even though the bristles might be the same, it's actually the hand feel. I was going to say mouth feel then. Why would I say that? People talk about that in food, don't they? Okay, I have to admit, I've been watching a bit of I've been on a bender watching Korean street food being made, which kind of sent me into a YouTube vortex of like food reviews and stuff. So that's where hand feel is coming from. I hope that's a thing. Otherwise, I've just co-opted that from the foodies. You know when they're talking about mouthfeel, like if something tastes, if it's like granular on your tongue, if there's too many sugar crystals or something. Listen, I don't need to be watching any more of these, especially on my health journey. It's way too tempting. But I got the nerve the other day to try and think that I could make those souffle pancakes. Well, first I was looking at the wobbly cheesecakes, and then I thought, no, I could definitely make that. Also, me who never cooks and has baked just a few times in my life, but I do like to bake. So I don't know. Maybe one day I'll just make that my project. I've been thinking about trying to take on some projects that are outside of, you know, like business. So if you've got any hobbies that you think I might enjoy, just list them in the comments below. Honestly, the more bizarre, the better. Currently, I'm really involved in Zumba, so you know, I'm going to keep that, but I could add something to the rotation, maybe something interesting. Not knitting, though. I've never really gotten into that. Oh, look, I'm sidetracked again. I'm so sorry. So I went all mixed media crazy on it. I really love the little happy homes on the hill. I think I did the haunted homes on the hills for Halloween. Look, at this point, you know, like I said, everything's already been done. We're just reinterpreting it for different seasons. I hope you had a good time. If you did do it, please show me on social media so I can enjoy having a look at that. Share it on the Facebook group if you would like. Add your own little twists and spins to it if you want to, yeah, whatever you want to do. Just have a good time with it, and I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, the little Battleship style of learning. If that was something that works for you, let me know. If yeah, I can't promise I'll do it again, because that is one of the more overly analytical ways to teach something, and it becomes a little stressful counting so many boxes. But I would recommend it if you are someone that wants to play with scale and you're doing kind of, you know, modeling of character designs and stuff. Something really interesting to play with and very beneficial. So anyway, thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful Valentine's Day. I hope to see you again next week. Until then, bye.